So I kind of hear that that was part of the process too, is putting on another head coach hat.
Yeah, things like budget, discipline, managing, not only managing kids, but now started having to manage adults. And that's a whole new ballgame, and I started off trying to please. And I learned real quickly that you can't please everybody. I saw a quote one time for leadership: if you want to please everybody, go sell ice cream.
Welcome to the Know Me Network. I'm your host, Chris Williams. We interview business owners, entrepreneurs, and industry experts just on a little bit more personal level. Today, we've got a special guest, Coach Hal Roberts. Coach, welcome to the show. I'm excited to get to know a little bit more about you, but introduce yourself. And now I'm also going to read something here in a second about you that I thought was fascinating.
Well, it's interesting that you call me coach, and anytime anybody calls me coach, I know that we go way back because the last time I coached was in 1989, I think. So it might even be further back than that. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm retired now. I was in public education for 38 years. 30 of those in leadership. I've done anywhere from coaching to athletic director I went from athletic director to elementary principal, and then high school principal, assistant superintendent.
Yeah. So
before that, I was fortunate enough to play football at the collegiate and professional level, and lived my boyhood dream of playing in the National Football League. And in that year, what was really cool is I played in the Hall of Fame game, I played on Monday Night Football, and I played in a playoff game. So that was really cool. So, and then after that, I wasn't any good, and they cut me, and that's when I started my coaching career.
Interesting. So I want to read something here. It looks like you've kind of, from coaching in the NFL, you've had a lot of life here and a lot of experiences. And so it says here, you touched on some of those. I'm reading this from Amazon, so just so you know.
Okay.
I liked it. It says you were a retired superintendent, 38 years in education. Listen, I'm just turned 40, so that's a long time. Anywhere from 4th to 12th grade, athletic director, principals, superintendents. And what I found really interesting that I want to unpack on the call is, you've spent the last 6-7 years doing some research on leadership and neuroscience, how that kind of works together. And this is what led you to maybe writing this book. How'd you get to today where you're just, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I got involved on Twitter probably in 2009 or so. And so through Twitter, I developed a whole lot of education relationships. And those of you that don't know about this, on Twitter, you can go at any night that you want to and get professional development in any topic, any subject, any grade level. And so I developed these relationships, and one of those was Dave Burgess, who is famous for Teach Like a Pirate. And through that, just started talking back and forth, and I thought, well, I've got a lot of experiences here, so I thought I'd write a book. Well, I didn't really write it until I retired. And excuse me, my first book was Pirate On, and that flopped. I mean, it did nothing. And so, and I'm sure you can identify with this, when you turn in a paper or make a talk, make a speech, you think, golly, I wish I would have said that, or I wish I would have written that. And so that's how this book came about. And so I went back, tweaked some chapters, and even added 4 more chapters to that book. So that's what came about with Make Waves.
And so how long's Make Waves been out there?
About 3 years.
Okay. Gotcha,
So,
gotcha.
By no means is it a bestseller, but it sells here and there. And, it's, but as a result of my books and on Twitter, I was able to do some public speaking. in Alabama and Florida and California and all over Texas at different events. And so anyway, I like to do that. I hadn't done that in a while. When you get retired, you kind of fade into the sunset, so to speak, as far as that goes. But I still keep my relationships. Some of those are really good, and they could be long-lasting friends. So anyway, so that's how all of that got started.
Interesting. So for those authors out there who are wanting to write a book, what would you tell someone out there trying to write their first book, with the mistakes that you may have made, or looking back, what would you wish you would have told yourself?
I think the main thing is to start. So many people say, well, I'm going to write a book, and that's about as far as they go. But I kind of took a template of the PIRATE acronym and grew from that. With initially, PIRATE was passion, immersion, relationships. Let me see, what was the A back then? Gosh, I can't even remember it now. But anyway, and E was enthusiasm, and T was transformation.
It says analysis and authority.
Yeah. So analysis was the original, and then with my first book, I added to each one of those. The P was passion and perseverance, and the I was immersion. And I added influence. And relationships is a whole chapter within itself, and I think that's the foundation of anything. Just like you're doing right now, you're networking with relationships, and I think that's any leadership, anybody that has any kind of success is going to be good at relationships.
I agree.
And then transformation, and then I added trust to that, and then the last one, enthusiasm, and gosh, I can't remember what that last one is, but I also added service at the end, and I think that's really important. But the others, like the first chapter of this book, is you're called to produce fruit, and no matter what line of work you're in, you need to produce fruit. Whether I did it. I based my chapter on John 15, on I am the true vine. And each one of my chapters, I have some scripture in it throughout to support those. And so that's another thing that I hope comes out, and many people have commented. And believe it or not, some of them get turned off as soon as they see that scripture is in there. And that's okay, but maybe I can plant the seed and get some fruit that way. But anyway, that's kind of it. On the neuroscience side of it, not sure how well. There was a person, again through Twitter, that I developed, and she was an expert. Her name is Julie Adams. She's out in California, and we have I would call her a friend. But anyway, she zoomed in one faculty meeting for us because she wrote a book, and I asked her about it, and so I asked her to do that, just like we're doing. She got on Zoom and made a quick little 5-minute presentation, and then threw it out for questions. And so that tweaked my interest, and boy, from that point on, for about 2 years, I dug into neuroscience. And basically, it's just brain-friendly teaching strategies, what works, how to open the brain for learning, and so forth. And so I put that in a little, each chapter in here. Not a whole lot, but anyway, yeah. So that's that side of it.
So I take it that you seem like there's a hole in the boat out there that you could fill with this message. Where do you go mostly with this message? Is it schools? Where do you take this message? You talked about speaking. Is it strictly speaking about the book, or is it strictly speaking about leadership characteristics? What is it that you typically talk about in your circuit?
Mostly about leadership, but even when I do that, I feed in neuroscience. I spoke at a national conference in California, and it was my whole talk was on neuroscience. And what's interesting about this, Chris, is that the question I ask before I get started when I do my neuroscience presentation, and I'm talking to educators now, and I say, okay, how many of y'all in your undergrad work had any kind of neuroscience or brain-friendly teaching strategies taught to you? And I bet you less than 10% raise their hand. And I got to thinking, what's wrong with our education teaching colleges, and neuroscience is not in there? And for the longest time, neuroscience was over here on this side, and education was over here on this side, and they didn't meet. But recently, they've been coming together and talking about how can neuroscience help teaching. And so that's probably happened probably in the last 10 years, maybe. But even so, as I do that, it's kind of like, aha, gosh, I wish I'd known that. I wish I knew more. And so
I think it's interesting.
I'm kind of nerdy when it comes to that. Find it really interesting. And by no means am I no expert, but anyway, my presentation topic is called the neurocardiologist teacher, because I want to touch the heart and the brain at the same time. And so
it's interesting that you talk about using the neuroscience to, what I kind of heard was basically open up the mind or the brain to learning.
Absolutely.
So my question is, well, when did it stop learning?
Oh, the brain never stops learning.
But obviously it comes to a point, where we've kind of gotten to this point where we may not be able to, I mean, it's always learning, but being able to turn it on, if you will.
Well, I'll tell you what, and I touched on this earlier, the biggest part that opens the brain is relationships. And I think you can think back to the teachers that made the most impact on you, are the ones that developed a relationship with you.
It's fair.
They are the ones that make the most impact. And probably neuroscience backed this up. Developing relationships is probably the biggest factor in getting kids to learn. Because if kids don't like you, they don't trust you. If they don't trust you, they're not going to like you. I mean, they're not going to learn from you.
Interesting.
And, so it just kind of starts from there.
Yeah, it looks like this is I think of a Wild at Heart book, where they talk about the cowboy stage, the warrior stage, kind of the stages of manhood, and I see you in that stage. You're the king that's out there building other kings right now, if you will. What's it like to be in this, giving of thyself back to the world, if you will?
Well, for one thing, I love to do that. I love to present to people so that they can learn. And, I don't know, I love, that time that I talked out in Long Beach, I was, quote, a featured presentation, and there were probably 400 people in attendance there. And even the next year came along, they emailed me, are you speaking at this conference this year? And but every time that I spoke anywhere, and I did it at principal conferences mostly.
So speaking to other leaders.
If I had 100 books, I would have sold 100. I sold out every time I went to a conference. Excuse me, and that's where I sold most of my books are at conferences.
Interesting. Did you grow up when you were a kid wanting to be an author?
Oh, no, that was not even on the radar. And in fact, the only reason that even got me thinking that way is through Twitter chats. Somebody says, you need to write a book out. You need to write a book. Oh, that's good. You ought to include that. And so with that kind of thinking, I thought, well, nothing to lose here. And so, yeah, that's how that got started.
So even getting into education, was there someone that you grew up around? Matter of fact, heck, I don't even know where you're from. Where are you from?
Dallas.
Yeah. So you went to high school here?
Yeah, I went to W.T. White in Dallas. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I did not know that. What's it like growing up in the city in the 70s, right?
Yeah. What's talking about relationships. I could show you my phone right now, and there are 18 guys that I went to school with that we continually text each other. And 2 or 3 times a year, we go to lunch with each other. And, obviously, we're a lot better than what we actually were when we tell our stories. We got a lot better. But anyway, that didn't happen very much. That you stay in touch. I mean, because we just finished our 50-year reunion just a couple of years ago. So to maintain relationships and friendships over 50 years is pretty cool.
That is, some people don't even have 5 best friends,
Yeah, yeah. And I could call on any one of those guys, and they would come running. Yeah, that's pretty cool to have that. And I grew up in Dallas, then went to school at University of Houston, and then, like I said, played a year in the NFL.
What kind of family did you grow up in? Mom and dad home? Was your dad out coaching? Where'd you get the coaching bug from? I'm kind of curious of what that looked like for you.
Mom and dad were at home. No, my dad was a vice president of a business forms company. Mom was a teacher. So that was kind of ingrained with me. But, when I first went to school at U of H, I thought I was going to go in business and go back home, work with my dad, grow through that business. But if you talk to Susan or me, one thing that got us both out of the business track was QMS 131, and that was college calculus. And I said, that's not for me. But playing football, that's where I got the coaching bug. And after I played and then came back, I started at the junior high level and worked my way up.
But you played ball. Kind of talk to me about what, high school football here is a big thing. Were you just the punter, or did you play other positions in high school?
Well, I played both ways, and punted. And really the only reason I played both ways is there was a receiver that got hurt, so I moved into his position. I played safety, and the best safety was a quarterback, and they didn't want him playing both ways. So I was at safety too. So, but yeah, we had pretty decent crowds. Even I think our best record was 4-6. So we weren't very good. But anyway, you develop relationships in the locker room, and that's where it all happens. And one of the things that I tell people about athletics is that you can teach leadership a little bit. You can teach a whole lot of things. You can teach somewhat teamwork, but you can't teach responding to adversity. And I think that's more than anything in athletics that is unique. I don't think you can get that anyplace else. I could be wrong. Somebody tell me how you can respond to adversity in someplace else, but that's built in, and you just learn that through getting your butt kicked or your face knocked in or whatever. But you have to, or you won't survive.
Yeah, you got to get back up.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I wasn't a star college athlete or anything. I didn't go to the NFL, but what was it like being recruited when you were going to high school and college? Like, talk to me about just maybe the difference that you saw your kids going through, and like, oh my gosh, this was 40 years ago.
Well, yeah, it was just cool, for somebody to come to you and say, come play football for us, and we'll pay your whole room, board, tuition, books, everything. And today, if that was somebody offered you that in itself is probably 50, 60, 70,000 bucks very easily. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I went to U of H because wanted to play in the Astrodome. In the punter, there's no weather to worry about. And so half my games, I didn't have to worry about wind, rain, cold, whatever. So that's kind of the main thing that sold me on U of H.
Yeah, and the Astrodome's like a historical monument now, right?
Yeah, it's not even, it's just standing there now. You know, at that time, it was the eighth wonder of the world. It
Yeah,
was a pretty
interesting.
big deal. I think it was finished in the mid 60s and I got there at 70. So it was kind of new at that point.
Yeah, so you are at Houston, playing football. As you look back, were there any really impactful mentors there that really pushed you into coaching, or when you look back, how'd that impact the rest of the future?
Yeah, I think I was impacted by a high school coach and
Mm,
more than anything. And again, it was through relationships with him. You know, he was probably the hardest on me, but he did it through because he cared, and you know, it was off the field as much as on the field. And so I tried to take that with me when I started coaching to do that kind of stuff. So, um, but anyway, yeah. So, and you know, in education, you're not going to get rich anywhere, but administration is where the biggest part of the money is. And so I went because I once said I'll never get out of coaching, and and then I thought, well, I wanted to make a bigger impact, you know, so I wanted to get into administration then, and so I went from being athletic director to elementary principal,
mm.
and it was me and 33 women, and that was kind of eye opening, and so, but anyway, that's how I got started. And all of that was at Spring Hill.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. And I found an interesting fact here as I go back a little bit. You played in the NFL, but you played for a team that's not around anymore, right?
Well, they're in Arizona now.
Yeah. So I read it. The St. Louis Football Cardinals, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but
So
we won the conference that year and went to the playoffs, and we, you know, that was at a time where the 14 game regular season, and we were 10-4. And yeah, the Vikings beat us up there in Minnesota. We played on December 22nd, and the field was frozen. The wind was blowing. It was it was snowing, and it was like single digit weather.
yuck.
Yeah, and being a skinny guy and a punter, having to wait on the sideline before I got in, it was something. The first thing that I always brought several pair of shoes with me because I wanted to see what would be best. And I went out on the field, and the first thing I saw, and this was at Minnesota, it was a baseball stadium also. I walked out of the dugout, and the first thing I saw were these machines with torches on them going across, trying to thaw the field.
Wow. It's an
So,
ice block itself.
yeah, yeah. So, uh, but anyway, yeah, I wouldn't trade that year for the world. Uh,
What so you get in there for a year. Obviously they brought you on. This is when NFL guys are making, 30 grand.
no, well,
50.
quarterbacks were making.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So this is back when you actually wanted to do this for fun.
Yeah, that's right. My first year's total salary, including playoffs, was like 21,000.
Yeah.
However, if you think about it, I lived for 2 years on that salary. Uh, I went back, finished school, and didn't work, and I was living on that salary last year. So, what would it
Interesting.
take now to live 2 years on a salary?
Yeah. Did you have kids then, or were you married then?
No, no, I got married during that time,
Okay.
but yeah.
So you're leaving football, and I see a blank here and on the timeline as I look at this. It says like from 75 to 85. What happened? Looks here you didn't start the athletic director position in Longview at Spring Hill till looks like around 85. So what was in between there?
I started off as a junior high coach and then moved up the coaching ladder. So I went from
Where were you junior high coach at?
in Bay City, Texas.
Okay.
And then I got a varsity position in Houston and Aldine. And then from there is when I went to Spring Hill as athletic director. So even at Spring Hill, I was only athletic director for 4 years, or head football coach for 4 years. And
But you
then,
spent a lot of time there in Spring Hill.
yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, and that's where I met you. And
Yeah,
Miss Susan too. We met all you guys there.
yeah.
Interesting question, leadership wise. You mentioned, hey, I got thrown into this, quote, leading 33 women. As you look back, that's a big leadership task there. That's not, out on the football field. Hey, let's get down and do this. This is, how do you lead differently here?
Well, all I knew was secondary. I spent 2 years at junior high coach, and the rest of the time was high school. And so I didn't have any desire to be an elementary principal, but the superintendent says, "We got this for you. Do you want it?" And I thought, let's do it. And so I went from being the athletic director to that elementary principal, and I love the job. Great job. Dealing with women is something else. But that was part of learning, I think. I didn't know elementary curriculum. I had to dig in and learn about that. I had to learn how teachers taught reading, And so I researched that, because when I went to the classroom to observe, I needed to know what I was looking for. And so I think that was one thing that I always strive to do is learn my craft, and that was learning leadership. And I can remember Susan and I talking on the way to Orange at West Orange Stark, where my first high school principal job was. She goes, "One thing you're going to need to learn is high school curriculum, because those teachers will call you on it." And so, boy, I dug into that. Now, subject wise, no, but learning how high school kids learned, and just curriculum over wise, and vertical alignment and horizontal alignment. I had to learn all that stuff. And so I was always trying to learn just to stay afloat, so to speak.
Yeah, I can imagine, I think of it as, hey, you went from head coach to quote, still the head coach.
Yeah.
No matter if I'm the head coach of this team or that team, I still got to go in and understand where things are, where are we? So I kind of hear that was part of the process too, is putting on another head coach hat.
Yeah. Things like budget, discipline, not only managing kids, but now started having to manage adults. And that's a whole new ballgame, and I started off trying to please. And I learned real quickly that you can't please everybody. I saw a quote one time for leadership: "If you want to please everybody, go sell ice cream." But and I don't ask me where this was, but I once learned that the best you can hope for in leadership is 80% support. So you have to realize that there's always somebody that doesn't buy into you, and that's something that you have to work through.
Yeah, and bummer sometimes when those somebodies are supposed to be people that you think would support you.
That's right. And to your face, they do. It's behind the scenes where it was. And unfortunately, I had a board that 7 bosses. I found that you can't please 7 bosses all the time, and depending on who the ones that are not supporting you, how strong they are influencing the others, is a pretty big deal. So
do you think there's any difference in, hey, I'm coming from a locker room authenticity, a coaching locker room authenticity and transparency, watching film, to, hey, now I've got responsibility for this entire school that I don't have film on, that I don't have things on, and I don't have the accountability. Did you see
Oh,
anything
yeah,
like that?
that's a great point. Yeah, even though I had to manage coaches, the coaching staff, where we were all working on the same goal, and you would think that would be the same thing on a campus, but I found that the teachers work for them more than they work for you, and that's where that part in my book about influence and trust and integrity, all of those come in, because once you start showing those kind of things, then they start buying into you. And so,
That's that top-down approach.
yeah, but I have learned that it's better to come alongside than to lead. And I mean, and it's not my way or the highway, but let me come alongside you and lead you. And I found that that was the best way to do that. And that's hard to do because, as a principal, you got administration up above you telling you what to do and what needs to be done. While at the same time, you got a campus of teachers and students that you had to manage. And so, and then all of that time, all of those things too, you also have parents that you have to deal with. So it's you never know what to expect from one day to the next as being a school administrator.
Yeah, so I mean, you moved right up the ladder in this thing. So again, if you had to look back at being a high school principal, how did Spring Hill prepare you for? I mean, if this wasn't Texas, you would have been moving a state or two away from
Oh, yeah.
North Texas to South Texas. So it's a different environment. It's a bay city, if you will. Talk about some of the differences in just that transition from Spring Hill to now I'm the principal, outside of the just the curriculum, but a leadership perspective. You're the man now.
Yeah, but I was able to move into that probably easier, just because number one, if you knew during that time, West Orange Stark was big in athletic, well, in football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first year I was there, we went to the state playoffs, lost in the state playoffs, but they're there every year. And so, I was able to kind of influence the coaching staff, and they were able to buy in real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you a quick story. First faculty meeting that I had, there were hired 33 teachers. They had a buyout deal, early retirement thing there. So I had to replace 33 teachers, 3 assistant principals, 2 coaches, and a band director that summer. My first faculty meeting, the superintendent comes to me and says, "Hey, Hal, you need to come with me. This is the first district meeting we're going to have, and you need to be there." And I thought, oh my, because I had a whole agenda laid out. And so I thought, what am I going to do? I just got through reading this book called Point Man by Steve Farrar. And in that, he shared the story of a Louis L'Amour book called Riding for the Brand. And let me show you what the result of that. So I read that, and the story goes, to ride for the brand, this is a Western deal, in that you come to here, you ride for the brand. I don't care about your background, but you buy into the brand. If you don't, then you can move on down the road. That was kind of it, but it said it a lot nicer in the story. But the middle faculty meeting right before Christmas had a couple of guys come to me that did our metal fabrication shop, and this is what they made me. It was an actual brand, WOS, that they gave me.
That's cool.
And even before that, there was a commotion. There were 2 adult guys arguing back and forth, and it was one of my assistant principals and another male teacher. I don't know if he was a coach or not, but at one point, one of them said, "Well, you're just not riding for the brand." And I thought, wow, that made a pretty big impact. And so I didn't have a theme for the year each year until that year, because the drill team made shirts riding for the brand and sold them. Football games that they mentioned riding for the brand, and so that really caught on. And so every year after that, I had a theme that I used, and so that was a pretty big deal, a pretty big turning point. And that in itself was able, just that story was able to get people on board with me for some reason, and that helped me in that first year do that. And so pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it makes me think about maybe the blessing that you had been given by having all of those vacancies, by able to bring on people that you knew were going to buy into all of your systems. So it just reminds me of coaching changes all around the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now listen, you've become the principal, you go on to superintendent, and I'm kind of learning this now as I've got kids in school. Principals are kind of cheerleaders for their own little section of the building of the school, if you will, but the superintendent is he's the real big cheerleader.
Well, I even said, well, not I, but I saw that superintendents are just CEOs. If you get right down to it, I mean, they manage a school board, which is huge. They manage teachers, students. They got the whole other part of facilities. You got budget. You have everything there is to run a company. So it's not just a superintendent, it's a chief executive officer of the whole. I mean, because like when I was in Bay City, our budget was $32 million. It was the largest business in the city. At London, when I was there, it was initially a K-8 district. And the first thing they wanted me to do was create a high school. And so I thought, oh, I can do that. I've been athletic director, I've been coach, I've been principal. My daughter was in theater, and so I learned a whole other part about the arts, along with all of the other honor society, ag, and all of that. And so, yeah, I can do that. Well, the first meeting I had with my administrative team, I said, okay, how many of y'all have this secondary experience? And they kind of looked at each other and they said, we all went to high school. And so, and that I wasn't going to get a whole lot of support as far as being able to create a complete high school. But anyway, so created a high school, passed a bond my fourth year to build a high school. So we went from roughly 350 students to 750 students, from a staff of 70 to over 100 in 4 years. Along with that, managing the budget. And, another thing that's completely out of your control is how much income you have from the state, from taxes, and you have to figure all of that stuff up to be able to build a budget. And,
so you didn't get a business degree, right?
No.
So do you think that, the assistant superintendent job really did you have some people around you there that kind of helped you and, that prepared you for, hey man, I'm able to open this new high school now?
Yeah, absolutely. For number one, my first stint in Bay City, 86 to 80, well, the guy that I coached with was superintendent when he hired me as high school principal, and then eventually moved into assistant superintendent. And so not only that, but when I was in Bay City, I was over HR, I was over facilities, I was over custodians, I was over police, everything else besides curriculum and business I had in the district. And so that prepared me to handle all of the stuff.
Would you say, looking back on some of that stuff, it sounds like, of course, this is back to producing fruit. This is all fruit, but thinking back, you're like, man, that was a really tough time. That was a hard, but I love the accomplishment. If you look back over that superintendent time, was there anything that was just, we really worked through that and I'm proud of that?
Well, creating a high school was something else because, like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of help. And so, when you talk about creating a high school, I mean, those people helped me along the way a little bit. I would give them jobs to do, to research. Um, but you know, when you think about it and start from scratch, from nothing, to be able to have a high school, because those kids went from that high school to neighboring school districts just to go to high school. And so now we were able to keep those kids, and to be able to do that was a pretty big deal. That's probably the thing that I'm most proud of is creating a high school and then building the high school. That was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, from an oversight perspective, how much oversight were you on the project? You guys hired all this out, but how much outside of creating it, did you go out and hire all the people or did you outsource all of that?
Oh no, it was me. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
of course they helped me. When I had to hire more teachers, the principal and assistant helped me do that. Um, but you know, the way I built curriculum was I talked to my people at Bay City. I said, let me have your curriculum and just the subjects and the brief explanation that you have in handbook where you actually choose subjects. Uh, I didn't create that. I just stole and borrowed and talked to other folks across the state that I knew. Um, so
Yeah,
it was fun.
not everybody can say that they've done that, it's a pretty unique situation. Well, that's really neat. And you stayed here and I guess and you're retired here from London, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. 2014 was my last year there.
And then did you take a little time off or did you jump right into, hey, I want to give back now?
Uh, well, while I was doing this, I was taking time off.
Okay.
It wasn't full time, um, and now I'm pretty much fully retired.
Gotcha.
Although what I'm doing now is our church, Lake Point, is a huge. It's a mega church, and there we are helping launch a new campus of Lake Point, which is right across the street from Watermark. I don't know if you know where Watermark is. We're right across from them, and we are helping launch that church. And Susan and I are heading the re-engage ministry there, which is the marriage ministry. And we are heading that. As a matter of fact, we just finished training our leaders this last Tuesday. Uh, and we will completely launch that next year in early part of the year, to where we will try to help struggling marriages get better.
Interesting. It's a lot of leadership going on. We got some leadership work and kingdom work, if you will. I always think the kingdom work means more.
Yeah. And, fortunately, spiritual gift
All right, there we go. Back in action here with Coach Roberts. Had a little technical difficulty for the moment, but Coach, now that we've got you back, this book has been something that you've been working on for how long now?
I like to say I wrote the book, but in about 2 years, and I actually typed it out in about 6 months. So, yeah, like I said, my first book, Pirate On, was kind of modeled after Teach Like a Pirate that Dave Burgess wrote. And then I went from this and just tweaked and added. And so, yeah, that's what brought this book about. It's whenever you write a book, you think, well, what am I going to entitle it? And that was another deal. I kind of wanted to move away from the pirate stuff and be kind of on my own. Be Hal Roberts, not Hal Roberts, the pirate after Dave Burgess.
Mm-hmm.
So since there was a whole lot of stuff in there about sailing and that kind of thing, I didn't want to move too far away from it. And matter of fact, a couple of my friends on Twitter helped me name this, and we came up with Make Waves, and so that's where we are on that.
Tell us about the book. I know you've kind of said it kind of outlined this pirate, but what kind of people are you hoping to pick this book up?
Obviously it was written for leaders, educational leaders, but even teachers have really liked it a lot. The ones that have it and read through it. And so I think any educator, I think any leader, and Chris, about leader, people say, well, I'm not a leader. But if you think about it, if you influence anybody, you're leading them. And so, it may not be for everybody, but it's probably more than you think. There's more of an audience out there that could use this than people realize. And so if there's any message that I'd like to get out there, is that this book is for just about anybody, no matter what line of work you're in, whether you're in leadership. If you have a family, you lead a family. Obviously, if you're in a classroom, you lead students. So there's a whole lot in here that can be helpful in any kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think that really what your whole life I could kind of hear is what you brought up in the beginning, is that, relationships are kind of something that, hey, I got hired by this guy, I knew this guy, if you will, kind of who out there, if you will, and how important, I guess, attachment is, if you will, just being able to be transparent and honest and humble with people along the way.
Well, if you think about it, if you look in Genesis, one of the first things God said when he created Adam, he said, man was not meant to live alone. And so you go from there, and our brain is wired for relationships. No matter what, the brain, here's another part of the neuroscience that I learned, is the brain is always seeking. It seeks relationships. It seeks pleasure. It seeks I can't think of all of them, but relationships is the biggest part that it seeks, and it's always seeking that. And so, if you realize that, then you can help wherever you are in developing those relationships, because that's how gangs get started. Is people get shunned by this group, and then here's a group that accepts me and will, quote, love me and let me know that I matter. And so it's real easy to understand how gangs get started if you understand that.
Yeah.
So, you need to be somebody else's gang, somebody else's tribe, somebody else's family, somebody else's team, where you accept them for who they are, where you can be transparent, you can be humble, and just like we say in our marriage, be fully known.
Mm.
And
I like that. That's been a big one for me as I've gotten a little older. It's for me, I kind of realized that I needed 3 things. I needed to be known, seen, and heard. And
Yeah,
so I think that's really important for our humanness, if you will.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so you talked about not meant to be alone. There's a lot of people out there that are isolated, especially Corona, all these different fears going on in the world. What encouragement would you give for people out there who need that relationship out there?
Golly, it's hard to say, man. You just got to find somebody because uh, in small and it doesn't have to be a whole lot. It doesn't have to be 20 people. If you could find two or three, and I talk about that in my book, is that Jesus had 12, but he also had that inner circle of three of Peter, James, and John, uh, where it's not like he was not unknown to those 12, but he was really known among those three. And I think if you can find two or three where you can be fully known what you're talking about, uh, it just makes life easier. I mean, if you think about it, if you're able to go to a friend and say, "Look, this is where I am. Can you help out? Can you help me here? Can you help me there?" And if you have those friends that are able to do that, then that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's that pride spirit that keeps men in particular from using the H word, right? Nobody wants to ask for help.
Absolutely. And
So
once you get past that, if you can get over that, then you're on the way.
I guess that's interesting. There's a lot of humility in asking for help too, right? That's putting ego and pride all down.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've read any of Brene Brown's books, but she had the last couple of books that I read of hers is really impactful. And the reason why I bring that up is because you use the term humility,
Mm.
and through her research, and she is big on research. And if you read anything about her, you'll find, I mean, she's thousands of hours of research before she writes anything. And she said leaders that show humility are more successful than those that don't. And so yeah, I think even in my book in chapters 12, it shows humility is showing vulnerability. That's the title of that particular chapter.
So, Coach, so let me ask you this. I'm struggled with this in my own life. How do you, and maybe this is just these two different leadership styles that are in the world right now. So you've got this old school, pull up your bootstraps, rub some dirt in it, and get the grit going. And I also feel like the flip side of that is some of maybe new school leadership where we're more empathetic. There's more humility, maybe more authenticity,
Yeah.
if you will. And I'm trying to figure out how you maintain being a leader and still come along with people and be on the journey with them.
Well, let me give you an example. There was at one point when I was high school principal in Bay City, and my, I did faculty meetings once a month by agenda. And the last agenda item that I just put speaking from the heart. And what I said then at that time, I said, I have realized I'm not a very good leader. I've said that in front of my faculty. And you would be amazed at what that did to bring the faculty together, to bring them wanting to help me. Because, I think most of them liked me, but they didn't like some of the things I was doing or didn't do. And some of my biggest critics got on board just because I was vulnerable at that point and said, guys, I'm just not doing a very good job. I need your help. And that goes a long, long way of people coming alongside and really buying into your mission of what you want to do, because they're not going to buy into a mission before they buy into you. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just being able to put thyself down, if you will, and elevate the greater good of the community and kind
Yeah.
of say, hey, I'm here too. So
You know, another thing that goes along with that, I mentioned to you, I put influence in there, but I also wanted to talk about integrity and trust. And one of the things that I've really learned, and that those two things are never owned, they're only rented, that you have to earn those every day. because even, and I say in here, life is a series of choices. I mean, you hear the phrase, well, I had no choice. Well, there's always a choice. No matter what it is, there's always a choice. And, the phrase, do the next right thing, as long as you use that, do the next right thing, then you're on the way to gaining that trust, keeping your integrity, and keeping the influence of what you were hired to do as a leader.
Mm. Integrity is a big word. Part of me wonders if some of that stuff's kind of maybe been lost out in the world, if you will. Integrity means I'm having to take responsibility I'm having to be responsible for all my choices.
Well, and like I say, one wrong choice can lose integrity, it can lose trust, and it may not lose it for some, it may lose forever, or it may lose it for a long time, because trust is built up over time, not through one act and one choice.
Yeah, it talks about here, basically trust, integrity, humility is building health and safe relationships. I think that that's a key word there is safe relationships, because, did everyone in the world grow up with safe relationships? And so we're just perpetuating that unsafe relationship into adulthood.
One thing that I just, matter of fact, the end of June, I stopped being this. I was an interim director of a crisis center for women and children. And it was residential, they lived there, but the women who came there were either sexually or emotionally, physically abused. Some were just homeless. One was literally taken off a bridge, and 2 days later, she was in our facility. Another was taken down from a noose around her neck, where she was unconscious, and 5 days later, she was in our facility. And so, there was one lady there. As I was walking into the dining area, I just stopped and opened the door for her. And she stopped and looked at me, and she goes, I'm sorry, I'm just not used to men treating me with respect. And so you can imagine the things that I learned there of what, because 90% of the women there had man issues. And so I had to really be careful of how I treated them. I'm kind of one of those that come alongside and put my arm around you or see you. I'd like to hug you. But before I did that, I was very careful to build safe and healthy relationships with each one of those women before they could come along under me and trust me, and know that I was there for their best interests.
That's
So
that's tough. How many women have come in and out of there?
Oh gosh, when I left there were 22 there.
Gosh.
Probably 7 or 8 kids.
And does the church help support some of that? How'd you get into that?
I got into it because there was a guy that wanted me to help create a school for kids that had an incarcerated parent. And so it was on that campus of Genesis, where the school was going to be located. Well, for some reason or another, the school didn't make, and the board was having problems with the director there. And so while they were going back and forth, they wanted me to be interim. Eventually, that director left, and I was the interim director for about 8 months. And so first, staff didn't trust me, don't know about the women, but through day by day, and they saw who I really was, and they came up, they were able to trust me, and we were able to move forward.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's where the whole known, seen, and heard. People need to see what we do. People are watching for sure.
yeah, one of the ones when I the last day, when I said, okay, I'm leaving y'all, and she came up and hugged me. She goes, you are such a good leader, and we were so mean to you at the beginning, and look where you are now. We're hugging you and crying because you're leaving. And so, that was fulfilling, while at the same time kind of sad that I was leaving.
Sure, 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 sure. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing well with the book here. You guys are active in the church, which is always good to hear. Um, really good to hear. Just to touch on one thing that we haven't talked about. I also see here just in the background, there's something called Safe Harbor Academy. What is this?
That's the school.
Okay.
That just didn't happen.
Okay.
I think it was just because we weren't able to get the word out more than anything.
Okay.
But anyway,
is that something that still might happen in the future, or have we kind of tabled that one?
It's tabled. It may be back there a little bit, but for a while, it's not going to happen.
Gotcha. Well, one thing I haven't asked about is you have two beautiful daughters that I haven't seen or heard from in a long time. Where are they? What are they up to?
All right. Colleen, the older, is here in White City. She is, for lack of a better term, a headhunter for C-suite employees.
Okay.
Quite successful, makes more money than I ever did. Has a boy and a girl, and so yeah, they're in Royce City. Emily, the younger, is now an assistant principal in Brownsboro. Has two boys. So yeah, that one fought being an educator for 5 or 6 years before she realized that's what she wanted to do.
Gotcha.
But yeah, matter of fact, she's been talking to me. There's been some things said that, it's interesting how any kind of leadership stuff, she gives me a call. What would you do?
Well, it's cool that she's got a place that she can go ask those questions too.
Yeah. When she was a teacher, she goes, okay, this is what happened. And this is how the principal handled it. What would you have done? So she was always calling me about those kind of things.
Yeah, that's wise. What's more beneficial as you look back? You've got all of this career, but now you kind of have made it to granddad perspective, if you will. What's it like being a granddad and also a grandparent, as well as, a parent to some 40-year-old kids? What's that like?
Being a grandparent is the best gig, because you can love on them and spoil them and then hand them back. So I'm sure your parents are the same way.
They are. I crack up the other day. My old man says I took him to drop off our daughter. She's gonna stay out there for the day, and I call him. What are y'all doing? Oh man, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and we just left Brahms. We got milkshakes.
Yeah, ice cream for breakfast, sure.
So it's awesome. Listen, Coach, it's been a pleasure getting a chance to unpack all this with you. If you were, I know you're trying to connect with some people out there. What do you want to tell folks out there, and how can they get in touch with you? Are you still open to these speaking engagements? And
Absolutely. They can contact me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. All of those, I'm there just as Hal Roberts. I mean, if you search Hal Roberts, you can find me.
Okay. And you're on Amazon as well. Hal Roberts, Make Waves. Hold the book up for us one more time. Let us see the book.
Oh,
yeah, so people can see Make Waves. Awesome.
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's a good book. There's some of it's my stuff, some of it's borrowed, stolen. But I do cite everything that I got from someplace else. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Yeah, I would still love to speak. I love doing that. We're really busy in our re-engage ministry and launching not only the ministry but also a new church. And so yeah, we're not just hanging around, sitting around on the couch too much.
Like I said, there's the stages of manhood. There's a lot of men out there who make it to retirement. It's like, shoot, I'm hitting the golf course. Well, that's cool, but hit the golf course and give back, right?
Yeah. Well, if you look in scripture, it doesn't ever say he retired. and lived out the rest of his days. He was still doing something. And I don't know. I think Susan kind of was like, I want you here with me. She loves it. But she also understands that that's kind of in me, wanting to do more, wanting to give back. I mean, I did not sign up for being a director of a crisis center for women and kids, but I loved it when I was doing that. I think I made a little bit of an impact. Um, so, and I would this ministry that we have. It's really fun doing it with Susan. We're both doing the same thing. We have a passion for marriages, and so able to live that out and do that is really something special.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I serve here at our church with my wife, and it's special for sure.
Yeah.
It really is. So, but listen, this was great. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll get all this loaded up, and appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity, Chris. It's been fun.
Yep.